When a special white-tailed deer named Lacy was about to give birth at Shadow Valley Deer Farm in West Virginia, no one could have predicted the amazing events that were about to unfold. The morning started like any other spring day at the farm, with the sun slowly rising over the misty mountains and the gentle sounds of deer moving through their peaceful enclosures. Shadow Valley Deer Farm isn't like other farms you might visit. Hidden away in the beautiful green hills of West Virginia, surrounded by tall oak trees, it's a peaceful place where deer with special colors live safely away from the dangers they might face in the wild. The farm stretches over 50 acres of rolling hills and gentle valleys, with specially designed enclosures that give the deer plenty of room to run, play, and live happy lives. The farm focuses on breeding white-tailed deer that look different from normal deer. Some are pure white like fresh snow, others have beautiful patches of white and brown, making each one unique and special in its own way. The farm's dedicated team works hard to create a natural environment for these special deer. They've planted various trees and bushes that deer love to eat, created shallow pools for drinking, and made sure there are both sunny spots and shady areas where the deer can rest comfortably. Every morning, the workers spread fresh hay, fill water troughs, and check on each deer to make sure they're healthy and happy. The sound of rustling leaves and gentle deer footsteps fills the air as these beautiful animals go about their daily lives. Regular deer have brown fur that helps them hide in the forest, blending in with trees and bushes to stay safe from animals that might want to hurt them. Their coat works like a natural camouflage, making them almost invisible when they stand still among the trees. But white deer, like Lacy, stand out against any background, whether it's the green grass of summer or the brown leaves of fall. In the wild, this would make life very dangerous for them. Hunters could spot them easily from far away, and other animals that hunt deer, like wolves and mountain lions, would have no trouble finding them. This is why places like Shadow Valley are so important. They give these special deer a safe place to live and grow, protected from the challenges they would face in nature. The farm's workers love every deer in their care, giving each one special attention and learning their unique personalities. Some deer are shy and quiet, while others are curious and playful. But Lacy held a special place in their hearts from the very day she was born. She wasn't just any deer, she was an albino, which means she was born without any color in her fur or skin. This made her completely white, like fresh fallen snow, with pink eyes that seemed to sparkle in the sunlight and a pink tinge to her skin where you could see tiny blood vessels underneath. Her ears would glow pink when the sun shone through them, and her nose was the color of a pale rose petal. Albino animals are incredibly rare in nature, and many don't survive in the wild because they stand out so much. Scientists estimate that only 1 in every 20,000 deer is born albino, making Lacy truly one in a kind. Her condition meant she needed extra care. Her pink eyes were sensitive to bright sunlight, and her white skin could easily get sunburned. The staff at Shadow Valley made sure she had plenty of shady spots to rest and special sheltered areas where she could stay comfortable during the hottest parts of summer days. From the beginning, there was something special about Lacy that went beyond her unusual appearance. She had a gentle nature that drew people to her, and unlike many deer who stay distant from humans, she seemed to enjoy the company of her caretakers. She would often come to the fence when workers approached, her pink nose twitching curiously as she investigated new sounds and smells. As Lacy grew from a tiny fawn into a beautiful adult deer, she became known as the Snow Princess of Shadow Valley. Visitors would often stop in their tracks when they first saw her, amazed by her pure white coat glowing in the sunlight. Children especially loved to watch her, pointing in wonder at the deer who looked like she had stepped out of a fairy tale. Life wasn't easy for Lacy from the very beginning. Just 2 weeks after she was born, something terribly sad happened. Her mother died after developing a sudden illness that the farm's veterinarians couldn't cure. The tiny white fawn was left all alone in the world, and everyone at the farm worried about her future. Baby deer need their mothers not just for food, but also to learn how to be a deer, how to behave, and how to stay safe. Without her mother, little Lacy seemed lost and confused, like a child who had lost their way in a crowded place. The first few weeks after losing her mother were very hard for Lacy. She didn't want to eat the special milk formula the workers offered her, and she seemed to lose interest in everything around her. She would hide in corners of her enclosure, trembling whenever anyone came near. Even the sound of other deer moving around nearby seemed to frighten her. Many of the farm workers started to think she might not make it. They had seen other baby deer lose their mothers before, and sometimes, despite their best efforts, these orphaned fawns didn't survive. The situation looked very gloomy for the little white deer. Each morning, the staff would find Lacy in a different hiding spot, curled up as small as she could make herself. Her pink eyes, usually so bright, had become dull with sadness. She would barely touch the fresh grass and tender leaves they brought her, foods that most baby deer love to eat. Her tiny body started to become thin, and her white coat lost its healthy shine. The workers tried everything they could think of, offering different types of food, playing gentle music near her enclosure, and even bringing in other friendly deer to keep her company. But among all the workers at Shadow Valley, there was one person who refused to give up hope. Her name was Becca, and from the moment she saw the struggling baby deer, she knew she had to do everything she could to help her live. Becca didn't just want to feed Lacy. She wanted to become a mother figure for her, to give her all the love and care she was missing. Having worked with orphaned deer before, Becca understood that what Lacy needed most was patience, gentleness, and consistent care. Every day, Becca would come to work early and stay late, making sure Lacy had everything she needed. She would sit quietly near the little deer, talking to her softly and encouraging her to eat. She would read books out loud in a gentle voice, just so Lacy could get used to human sounds without feeling scared. At first, Lacy was very shy and wouldn't come close, but Becca was patient. She knew that earning the trust of a frightened baby deer would take time and gentleness. She started by simply sitting still, letting Lacy get used to her presence. Then she began bringing special treats, tender leaves from Lacy's favorite plants, and sweet apple pieces that most deer find irresistible. Things got even harder when Lacy started getting sick. She developed several infections that made her weak and tired. Her legs would shake when she tried to stand, and sometimes she wouldn't even lift her head when someone came to check on her. The farm's veterinarians worked very hard to help her, giving her medicine and checking on her many times each day. They had to give her special vitamins to help her fight the infections and medicine to bring down her fever. Everyone at the farm pitched in to help. Some would bring special food to tempt her to eat. Others would spend their break time sitting with her so she wouldn't feel alone. Becca started sleeping at the farm during this difficult time, setting up a small bed in the monitoring room near Lacy's enclosure. She would wake up every few hours during the night to check on the little deer, making sure she was comfortable and had everything she needed. On particularly cold nights, she would bring extra blankets to keep Lacy warm. During rainstorms, she made sure Lacy had a dry, cozy spot to rest. Slowly, very slowly, Lacy started to get better. First, she began eating more regularly, starting with just a few mouthfuls of food at a time. Then, she started showing interest in her surroundings again. The sparkle came back to her pink eyes, and she began to move around more, exploring her enclosure with growing curiosity. One morning, she even played with a butterfly that had landed nearby, showing the first signs of the playful personality that would later make her famous. Becca's heart filled with joy every time she saw Lacy take another small step toward recovery. The first time Lacy came up to the fence on her own to greet Becca was a moment no one at the farm would ever forget. The tiny deer was fighting hard to live, and her determination touched everyone who saw her. She started responding to Becca's voice, perking up her ears whenever she heard her approaching. Soon, she was strong enough to run and play like other young deer, though she still stayed close to Becca whenever she could. As spring turned to summer, Lacey's remarkable recovery became a source of inspiration for everyone at Shadow Valley. The scared, sickly fawn had transformed into a happy, healthy young deer. She still needed extra care because of her sensitive albino skin and eyes, but she had developed a strong spirit that showed in everything she did. Her survival story became an example of how love, dedication, and never giving up hope could make what seemed impossible possible. As weeks turned into months, something beautiful started happening between Becca and Lacy. The scared little deer who once ran away from everyone began to look forward to Becca's visits. Each morning, as the sun rose over the hills of Shadow Valley, Lacy would stand by the fence of her enclosure, her ears perked forward, waiting to hear the sound of Becca's footsteps on the gravel path. When Becca arrived at the farm, Lacy would come running to greet her, making small, happy sounds that sounded almost like a puppy's excitement. Their bond grew stronger every day, becoming something truly special that amazed everyone who saw them together. The transformation in Lacy's behavior was remarkable. Where she once hid from all humans, she now followed Becca everywhere she could. During feeding times, she would gently take food from Becca's hand, her soft nose tickling Becca's palm. When Becca cleaned the enclosure, Lacy would stay close by, sometimes playfully pulling at Becca's jacket or nuzzling her shoulder, as if offering to help with the chores. Even on rainy days, when most deer prefer to stay in their shelters, Lacy would brave the weather just to spend time with her special human friend. Becca learned all of Lacy's little habits and preferences, paying attention to every detail that made the white deer happy. She discovered that Lacy preferred her hay in small, neat piles rather than one big stack, and would carefully arrange it just the way she liked it. She noticed that Lacy had favorite spots in her enclosure that changed with the time of day. A sunny patch near the fence in the morning, a shady area under an old oak tree during hot afternoons, and a cozy corner filled with soft straw for nighttime. Becca even learned to recognize different sounds Lacy made. A soft snort meant she was content, a higher-pitched call was her way of asking for attention, and a gentle humming sound showed she was especially happy. In return, Lacy showed complete trust in Becca, something rare for deer who are naturally cautious animals. She would follow Becca around the enclosure like a faithful shadow, watching everything she did with curious pink eyes. When Becca sat down to do paperwork on a bench in the enclosure, Lacy would often lie down next to her, resting her head near Becca's feet, or sometimes even in her lap. Other workers would smile when they saw Lacy trying to peek at Becca's clipboard as if she wanted to help with the daily reports. The bond between them went beyond just friendship. It was like they could understand each other's feelings. On days when Becca felt tired or sad, Lacy seemed to know it and would stay especially close, gently pressing her head against Becca's side in a deer's version of a hug. If Lacy was feeling under the weather, Becca could tell just by looking at her eyes or the way she held her ears, and would spend extra time comforting her. What made their relationship even more special was how it helped Lacy grow into a confident adult deer. The frightened fawn who once trembled at every sound became brave and curious about the world around her. Despite her unusual appearance, she became one of the happiest and most playful deer at Shadow Valley. She would run and jump in her enclosure, especially in the early morning hours, her white coat catching the sunlight like freshly fallen snow. Other staff members often commented on how different she was from the sickly, frightened fawn they had almost lost hope for, saying it was like watching a completely different deer. As Lacy grew older, she showed everyone just how special albino deer could be. Her white coat, which would have been dangerous in the wild, gleamed beautifully in the sunlight, making her look like a creature from a fairy tale. The special bond between Becca and Lacy taught everyone at Shadow Valley important lessons about patience, trust, and the power of unconditional love. Young children visiting the farm would watch in wonder as the beautiful white deer responded to Becca's gentle voice, showing them that animals can understand kindness and return it in their own way. School groups that came to learn about deer would always hear the story of Becca and Lacy as an example of how caring for animals requires dedication, understanding, and a lot of heart. During special events at the farm, Becca would often give talks about Lacey's journey from a scared orphan to a confident adult deer. She would explain how every animal is unique and deserves a chance to thrive, even if they look different from others. Lacy would usually stay close by during these talks, as if adding her own silent testimony to Becca's words. Sometimes she would even approach the fence to greet visitors, showing none of the fear that had once ruled her life. The story of their friendship spread beyond Shadow Valley, appearing in local newspapers and nature magazines. People would travel from far away just to see the beautiful white deer who had formed such a close bond with her caregiver. But for Becca and Lacy, none of the attention mattered. They were simply two friends who had found each other when they needed it most, creating a bond that would last a lifetime. When Lacy reached the age where deer usually start having babies of their own, the staff at Shadow Valley became excited about the possibility of her becoming a mother. Female deer can have babies when they're as young as 7 months old, but Lacy seemed to be in no hurry to find a mate. She was very particular about which male deer she would spend time with, showing the same careful, thoughtful nature that had always made her special. The staff at Shadow Valley knew that breeding albino deer was both important and delicate work. They hoped Lacy might have babies that shared her unique white coloring, which could help them learn more about how albino traits pass from parent to child. But more than that, they wanted Lacy to experience the joy of motherhood, especially since she had lost her own mother so young. At first, this worried the staff when Lacy showed no interest in any of the male deer. They carefully tried introducing her to several of the farm's male deer, following all the best practices they had learned over years of working with deer. But Lacy wanted nothing to do with them. Most of these males were very confident and sometimes pushy, displaying the typical proud strut that male deer often show. This seemed to frighten Lacy, reminding the staff that her gentle nature needed a special kind of companion. She would run away and hide whenever they came near her, sometimes refusing to come out of her shelter for hours afterward. Even her favorite treats couldn't tempt her to approach when these bold males were around. The staff watched with concern as Lacy retreated into herself during these failed introductions. She would stay in the furthest corner of her enclosure, her ears flat against her head in a clear sign of distress. Becca noticed that Lacy would eat less on days when they tried introducing new males, and she seemed to lose some of her usual playful spirit. After several unsuccessful attempts, the staff realized they needed to try something different. They held many meetings to discuss what might work better for their special deer. After careful thought and observation of Lacy's personality, they brought in a gentler male deer who wasn't as aggressive as the others. This new deer, whom they named Oliver, was younger than the other males and had a quieter disposition, and he moved with a calm grace that set him apart from the more boisterous males. The staff placed him in the enclosure next to Lacy's, giving her plenty of time to observe him from a safe distance. The change in Lacy's behavior was immediate and wonderful to see. Instead of running away, she actually approached the fence separating their enclosures, showing interest in the new arrival. She seemed curious and interested, stretching her neck to sniff the air near him. The staff watched in amazement as she began spending more and more time near the fence where she could see Oliver. She would graze alongside him, though separated by the fence, and sometimes they would even rest in the shade at the same time, each on their own side, but clearly aware of each other. Becca was especially happy to see Lacy finally finding a companion she felt comfortable with. She noticed how Lacy's ears would perk up whenever Oliver came near, and how she would make soft, gentle sounds that the staff had never heard from her before. After several weeks of successful fence line meetings, the staff decided it was time to try putting them together in the same enclosure. They chose a quiet morning for the introduction, making sure everything was perfect. The enclosure was cleaned and filled with fresh hay, and they scattered Lacy's favorite treats around to help her feel secure. When they opened the gate between the enclosures, everyone held their breath, hoping this meeting would go well. To their delight, Lacy and Oliver seemed to understand each other perfectly. They moved slowly and carefully around each other, neither showing any signs of fear or aggression. As the days passed, they became inseparable, often grazing together or resting side by side under the shade trees. The staff would sometimes catch them playing together in the early morning hours, running and jumping in their enclosure like young fawns. Soon, the staff began noticing changes in Lacey's behaviour that made them hope she might be pregnant. She started spending more time grooming herself, which is something deer often do when they're expecting babies. Her usual careful attention to her white coat became even more thorough, and she would spend long periods carefully cleaning her fur. She also began eating more than usual, especially enjoying the special vitamin-rich feed the staff provided. They noticed her looking for quiet, private spots in her enclosure, sometimes rearranging the straw in different corners as if testing out possible nesting sites. The first time Lacey became pregnant, everyone at Shadow Valley was overjoyed. They set up special cameras to record everything, positioning them carefully so they wouldn't disturb her, but could still document this important event. The staff made sure she had the best care possible, giving her extra portions of her favourite foods and monitoring her health closely. Becca spent even more time than usual with her, noting every small change and making sure she was comfortable. But sadly, this happiness didn't last long. Despite everyone's best efforts and care, Lacey lost the baby halfway through her pregnancy, and everyone at the farm was heartbroken. The staff noticed immediately when something was wrong, and though they did everything they couldn't prevent the loss. Becca spent extra time with her during this sad period, making sure she knew she wasn't alone. She would sit quietly with Lacey for hours, sometimes just talking softly to her or bringing her favourite treats. 6 months after losing her first baby, something wonderful happened. Lacey became pregnant again. This time felt different from the start. She seemed more confident and relaxed, as if she knew exactly what to do. The staff watched her carefully, but tried not to hover too much, wanting her to feel calm and comfortable. Deer are pregnant for about 180 to 200 days, and during this time, Lacey started preparing for her baby in the sweetest ways. She would spend hours walking around the meadow part of her enclosure, seeming to look for the perfect spot to have her baby. She would nose at the grass, arrange small spots to lie down, and then move on to check another area. As the time for the birth grew closer, Becca noticed Lacey becoming more restless. She would pace around her favourite spots in the meadow, lie down and get up again, and spend more time alone. These were all signs that the baby was coming soon. The staff prepared their cameras and got ready to document everything while being careful not to disturb Lacey. The actual birth began early one morning, just as the sun was rising over Shadow Valley. Lacey had chosen a quiet spot, partially hidden by tall grass, and the staff set up their cameras at a respectful distance. Everyone held their breath as they watched, hoping everything would go well this time. What happened next was so amazing that it would soon have millions of people talking about it all over the world. Lacey gave birth to her first baby, and everyone gasped when they saw it. Instead of being pure white like its mother, the baby had a beautiful pattern of white and brown patches, something called piebald colouring. But the surprises weren't over yet. To everyone's complete amazement, Lacey wasn't finished. She soon gave birth to a second baby, and this one was pure white like her, another albino deer. Having twins is already special for deer, but having twins with 2 different rare colour patterns was something almost nobody had ever seen before. The birth of Lacey's unusual twins quickly became famous beyond Shadow Valley. People from all over the world wanted to learn about the albino deer who had given birth to 2 differently coloured babies. Scientists were especially interested because it was so rare to see both albino and piebald deer in the same family. Lacey proved to be just as wonderful a mother as everyone hoped she would be. She cleaned and fed both babies with great care, not caring at all that they looked different from each other. The piebald twin was quiet and careful like its mother, while the white twin was more adventurous and curious about everything. As the babies grew, they became even more special to watch. The piebald fawn loved staying close to Lacy, following her everywhere and learning all her gentle ways. The albino fawn was braver, often the first to investigate new things in their enclosure and always excited to see the farm workers, especially Becca. Becca continued to be an important part of Lacy's life, now watching proudly as her former baby showed what a good mother she could be. Sometimes, when the twins were sleeping peacefully, Lacy would still come over to spend quiet time with Becca, just like she used to do. Their special bond remained strong, even as Lacy created new bonds with her own babies.